where unexpected weather events are increasing, what do consumers need to know about the necessary changes to their insurance cover and what types of insurance to look for in order to prepare for unexpected losses in the event of weather surprises? Now, from earthquakes in Johannesburg to huge waves in Cape Town and flash floods in Durban, South Africans have been experiencing unexpected weather events in their number. This brings concerns about the protection of households and the valuables within them. To explore this, I'm joined by Vis Govender, the co-founder at Everything Insurance, to speak on what South Africans need to know. And he joins us virtually from here in Johannesburg. Vis, it's not so long ago where we were speaking to insurance experts about how and if people should get cover for unexpected events caused by load shedding. And now we need to speak about climate change and all this freak weather that we're seeing happening. South Africans really need to cover themselves in various ways. What questions do they need to ask to ensure that they are covered for any eventuality caused by these big weather events that we're seeing?
Evening. Yeah, I think we're fortunate in South Africa that we don't really suffer from natural catastrophes to the extent that you do in other parts of the world. So most of our insurance policies are quite comprehensive, and they cover you against most weather-related events. So we're generally okay. If you've got insurance on your home or your business or your building or your car, you are generally okay. That being said, with climate change and with the changes we're seeing in weather patterns, insurers and in particular reinsurers are getting quite circumspect, about what they do and what they don't cover, and they're starting to impose restrictions. And these restrictions are, sort of trickling into the market and coming into wordings and policies on an ongoing basis. So you don't really know, what you might be buying. So the best thing to do is to read the fine print, compare, use some of the tools that are available to compare these policies before buying. And I can give you some of the typical things you need to look out for.
Please, if you could, what are the exact things? I mean, we could advise people to read the fine print, and we can all do that, but what should we be looking for specifically?
Well, you should be looking for things like, there are some policies that will exclude hail cover. There are some policies that will exclude flood cover in a particular area, for example, like, in KZN, after the last series of floods, certain parts of KZN are specifically like the Isipingo Basin area is becoming uninsurable. So your policy might insure you, and there might be a clause on there that says, we exclude flood cover. So you need to look out for things like that. You need to look out for things like your retaining walls are not covered, or your pool and your garden aren't covered. Those are the kind of things one or two to look out for and be careful about. And then, some of the good and comprehensive policies out there will give you additional covers, like you might be covered for the physical damage that happens to your building or your contents or your vehicles, but the knock-on effect of that, if it's a personal individual or a family, if your home is uninhabitable for a period of time because of flood, you will incur significant costs to go and rent somewhere else or find alternate accommodation. And you have, so there's cover for what we call alternate living expenses or rent cover. Look for that. Make sure you have that on your policy. Most good policies will give you that. If you're a business, similarly, if your business is damaged in some respect, your equipment, your building by flood, you will need business interruption cover because you can't operate and you're not generating the revenue. So your insurance policy, if you've got a good one again, will provide you with revenue protection, business interruption cover, profit protection, loss of profits type cover. And what you need to do is make sure that you've got it for an adequate amount of time. Some policies might give you business interruption cover for, 3 months. But should your building need to be rebuilt, it's probably going to take you 2 years. So make sure you've got sufficient business interruption cover. Those are some examples, and there are many.
Now, if I were to be looking for insurance compared to a friend who lives in Durban, let's say, looking for insurance, or in Cape Town, will there be a difference in what kind of insurance we should be looking for and asking for in terms of what weather patterns are expected in those areas? And is there a difference in what we are expected to pay depending on where we live?
The former, no, there isn't really different insurance covers or types of insurance that you'd buy if you're living in Durban versus Johannesburg. But you are quite likely to pay more for certain perils. We refer to them as perils, to be covered against certain perils. So if you're living on the Atlantic seaboard in Western Cape, you might not have sea surge cover or flood cover. Or if you do have it, it's going to cost you more. If you're living in certain areas, let's say Knysna, it's going to cost you more for fire cover and so on. So risk rating is by area is definitely something that you face, but there aren't really different covers that you're going to buy depending on where you live, I'd say.
Now, just in closing, Vis, I mean, you spoke about risk there. You are really in the business of risk, and as South Africans, one could say that we live in a moment of risk on any given day, depending on if we're without electricity or we're without power, or there are massive waves or floods that are coming our way. I'd like to know from you what kind of impact that's having on your business, on the morale in your industry. Is the ongoing pace of the risks that we face in South Africa, whether if it's self-imposed risk, or like with the climate, things that we have no control over, what kind of impact does that have on your business?
Quite significant. The impact is quite significant. It probably does impact morale. It certainly impacts profitability and the costs. Claims, the incidence of claims goes up significantly. The industry has had to take some quite unprecedented steps around load shedding. So almost every single insurer in South Africa has now excluded grid failure. So if the national grid goes down, the impact on you and your belongings and your businesses, you won't be insured for it. And you were insured for it a few months ago and over the last couple of decades. That's a very significant impact. And then in terms of poorly managed infrastructure, potholes on the roads, significant. The traffic lights that aren't working, the incidence of accidents at these unguarded intersections, very significant. So, in short, it's absolutely impacting the industry. It's impacting by more frequent claims and more significant or severe claims, which in turn results in, it being more expensive for the man in the street and the business in the street to insure themselves. Okay. So you're right.
Thank you so much for that insight. Vis Govender is the co-founder at Everything Insure. We thank him for his insight this